Let's begin with something subtle but incredibly powerful: the emotional shield. In many relationships, narcissistic behavior does not announce itself with arrogance or grandiosity. It arrives wrapped in tears, vulnerability, and apparent sensitivity. And this is where confusion begins. Because we are culturally conditioned to respond to visible emotion with protection, not scrutiny. When someone appears hurt, we instinctively soften. We lean in. We question ourselves before we question them. But psychology teaches us that emotion is not proof of innocence. It is simply energy expressed outward. A person can cry and still be manipulating. A person can appear fragile and still be exerting control. The pattern often unfolds like this. You raise a concern. You attempt to address something that felt disrespectful or unfair. Instead of dialogue, the atmosphere shifts. Tears emerge. The focus moves away from the issue and onto her pain. Suddenly, you are not discussing behavior anymore. You are managing emotions. And before you know it, you are apologizing for bringing it up at all. Carl Jung often spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we do not wish to see. Emotional fragility can become a socially acceptable mask for the shadow's desire to dominate without appearing dominant. It is control that hides behind woundedness. The critical question is not whether someone feels hurt. The question is whether hurt is being used to avoid accountability. When every difficult conversation transforms into your guilt, you are no longer in dialogue. You are in deflection. And if you cannot distinguish between genuine vulnerability and strategic fragility, you will surrender your voice without ever realizing you gave it away. Now consider something even more subtle: the power of collective perception. Human beings do not exist in isolation. Every relationship lives inside a social framework. Family, friends, co-workers, they all form a kind of psychological jury. And that jury is rarely neutral. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to protect women from harsh criticism. We are taught to be patient, to be understanding, to assume good intention. On the surface, this seems noble, and often it is. But when protection turns into unquestioned defense, it becomes a shield for unhealthy behavior. If a man displays arrogance or emotional manipulation, people are quick to label it toxic. But when similar traits appear in a woman, they are frequently reframed. She is stressed. She is overwhelmed. She is going through a lot. The behavior is softened by narrative. Carl Jung warned that what is collectively denied becomes collectively enabled. When a society refuses to acknowledge the shadow in one group, it does not eliminate the shadow, it gives it camouflage. This is why you may find yourself isolated when trying to explain what you're experiencing. Others may defend her before hearing your perspective. They may subtly suggest that you are being insensitive, or that you simply need to handle it better. Over time, this erodes your confidence in your own perception. And this is the true danger. Not the behavior itself, but the doubt it plants within you. When society protects an image more than it protects truth, accountability dissolves. The moment you begin to question your own sanity, instead of questioning the pattern, you have stepped into psychological quicksand. And if you do not learn to trust your perception, no one else will do it for you. There is another dimension to this dynamic that is often misunderstood, and that is charm. When most people think of narcissism, they imagine loudness, dominance, overt self-importance. But there is a quieter form, one that operates through social intelligence rather than intimidation. It is refined, observant, emotionally perceptive, and precisely because of that, it is far more difficult to detect. Charm in itself is not manipulation. It becomes manipulation when it is strategic. You may notice how effortlessly she reads a room. She knows exactly when to smile, when to affirm, when to flatter. She studies your strength, your insecurities, your aspirations, your insecurities, your aspirations. At first, this feels intoxicating. You feel seen, understood, chosen. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. Warmth appears when you align with her expectations, and distance appears when you assert independence. Affection becomes conditional. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. In healthy individuals, the persona is flexible. In narcissistic structures, the persona becomes a tool. It is carefully crafted to secure admiration and loyalty. What looks like emotional intelligence may, in fact, be emotional leverage. This is why the control feels invisible. There are no overt threats, no obvious domination. Instead, there is a subtle calibration of reward and withdrawal, approval when you comply, coolness when you resist. And because it is delivered with a smile, you hesitate to question it. But love does not require performance to sustain. Warmth, the moment affection becomes a currency rather than a constant, you are no longer relating, you are negotiating. And if you mistake strategic charm for genuine connection, you will trade your autonomy for validation without realizing the cost. There is also the matter of narrative. And narrative is power. In any conflict, the person who defines the story often controls the outcome. This is not merely social, it is psychological. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. We do not react only to events. We react to the interpretation of events. And when someone consistently positions herself as the wounded party first, she frames the lens through which everyone else will see the situation. You may notice how quickly the focus shifts. A boundary is set. A concern is voiced. Instead of examining the behavior in question, the conversation turns toward how deeply she has been hurt by your tone, your timing, or your delivery. The original issue fades into the background. Now the central theme is her suffering. Carl Jung spoke about projection, the unconscious tendency to displace one's inner conflicts onto others. In narcissistic dynamics, projection often merges with narrative control. Responsibility is relocated. The reaction becomes the crime. Your frustration is labeled aggression. Your attempt at clarity is reframed as insensitivity. Over time, you begin to defend yourself, not from what you did, but from how you are being portrayed. This is how psychological inversion occurs. The person addressing the problem becomes the problem. The danger here is subtle. You may start rehearsing conversations in your mind, trying to ensure you sound gentle enough, careful enough, calm enough, not to resolve the issue, but to avoid being cast as the villain. But accountability cannot survive inside a distorted story. When someone consistently rewrites reality to preserve their innocence, they are not seeking understanding, they are securing power. And if you do not challenge the narrative, you will slowly begin to live inside it. Another pattern that often escapes immediate recognition is indirect aggression. It does not arrive with shouting or explicit hostility. It arrives quietly, almost politely. Almost politely. And that is precisely why it is so disorienting. Instead of open confrontation, there is withdrawal. Instead of direct criticism, there are subtle remarks disguised as humor. Instead of conflict in private, there is sweetness in public and distance behind closed doors. The inconsistency creates confusion, and confusion is psychologically destabilizing. Jung observed that what is unconscious tends to manifest in indirect ways. when aggression cannot be expressed openly, because it would damage the image, it finds covert channels. A delayed text message, a withheld compliment, a carefully timed silence. None of these acts are dramatic on their own, but collectively they create an emotional climate of uncertainty. You begin to question yourself. Was that comment intentional? Am I overreacting? Did I imagine the coldness? Because there is no clear evidence, you struggle to articulate what feels wrong. And when you cannot articulate it, others struggle to validate it. Others struggle to validate it. This is the genius of subtle manipulation. It leaves no fingerprints. The silent treatment becomes needing space. The backhanded compliment becomes just joking. Public charm becomes proof that the problem must be you. Over time, this ambiguity erodes your psychological footing. You are not arguing about facts. You are arguing about perception. And perception is easier to dismiss. But healthy relationships do not require you to decode hidden messages. They do not leave you chronically uncertain. If you feel more confused than hurt, pay attention. Confusion is often the byproduct of suppressed truth. And the moment you stop rationalizing the pattern, clarity begins to return. Finally, we must turn the lens inward, because no dynamic sustains itself without participation. Many men are raised with an unspoken mandate: endure, be steady, do not overreact, absorb emotional turbulence without complaint. Strength in this framework is measured by tolerance, and while resilience is a virtue, unexamined endurance can become self-abandonment. When faced with subtle manipulation or chronic emotional instability, the instinct is often to rationalize. She is just stressed. It will pass. Every relationship has challenges. These thoughts are not foolish. They are attempts to preserve stability. But when patience becomes a pattern of self-silencing, something deeper is happening. Jung emphasized the importance of integrating the shadow, acknowledging the parts of ourselves that avoid confrontation, that fear conflict, that crave approval. Sometimes the reluctance to set boundaries is not about love. It is about the discomfort of asserting one's own authority. You may tell yourself that staying calm is maturity, that absorbing disrespect is compassion, that suppressing frustration is strength. Yet over time, you notice a quiet erosion. Your preferences shrink, your voice softens, your standards blur. This is how tolerance unintentionally reinforces unhealthy behavior, not through weakness, but through misplaced responsibility. You begin managing her emotions more carefully than your own well-being. True strength is not silent endurance. It is clear boundaries expressed without aggression. If you continue to trade your peace for the illusion of harmony, you will eventually lose both. At some point, you must decide, is your definition of strength protecting your dignity or quietly dismantling it